right, Inner World, episode 10. We're back at it, guys. And the gravy portal openeth and the knowledge floweth. There's so much to talk about. We're going to be getting into the mythos of Abraham and Sarah, or Sarai, today. And, I did my best to be exhaustive in what I could come up with on this subject, but honestly, I was pulling the thread till right before we get on the air to record. And I think I just opened up several new avenues of research and syncretism on this subject. So we'll probably have to, as we do, keep building on it going forward in the future. Dylan's got great notes prepared. I'm super excited. This is going to be a good one. Definitely make sure you are listening to all of these so that you can get the context that comes from earlier iterations. And it probably even might take some, following up on our leads, our sources, or at least going through some of these episodes more than once, because it can be complicated, but the more pieces of the puzzle that you can grasp and that you have a memory link to, the more you see how it all fits together. Dylan, my man, how you doing?
Sowing the seeds of Renaissance, as everybody who just watched the intro can listen to and hear, or hear and see, I should say. Yeah, so I'm excited for you to catch it. Chance has no idea at the time of this recording, but the fact that that music was available was just, ooh.
Yeah, Dylan crafts all these really cool, unique intros for every episode, for which I'm extremely grateful because he does an excellent job and saves me the time of having to do a less good job. Renaissance, though, do you mean Renaissance like an expansion of learning and knowledge of the
I mean the good version, not like
of ancient texts left and right and selling big bags of gold to the Pope?
No, definitely the former, not the latter. The actual one, not the truth tard, everything is bad and, everything's fake. And, there's a lot of that, but there's also enlightenment that comes with real Renaissance. And that's what I've always tried to do in my entire adult life. So nothing's changing, but I've been getting exceptionally good at it. And, I think our work does that.
You said that today, as the day of the recording, is Rosh Hashanah, and you were going to say some syncs with that.
Yeah. So do you remember how last episode we were talking about how almost every culture has like a reckoning of the year at a different time? And I think we covered the Egyptians reckoning it at the flood of the Nile at the summer solstice. You have certain portions of the people on the Italian peninsula reckoning it in winter, then in springtime with the calendar of Romulus, which I am suspicious of, and then back to winter. And then you have the Irish November. You have the Jewish New Year is today, Rosh Hashanah. Now, when you look at how it's spelled in Hebrew, or I should say in English, it looks like R-O-S-H. But if you look at the name, it's going to be something that we've talked about exhaustively.
Well, just in the name, it's Ras, the head, the start, and Ana, the year, the start of the year. The Hay would be like a the, so Rosh Ha-Shana.
So there's no reason to ever transliterate that as R-O. But they do it. Yeah, it's an aleph, yeah. So that's R-A-S. And in Old Synagogue Hebrew, they don't use the samek, they just use the shin, as far as I can tell. So there was a time where the reason they invented all these newer letters and the point system is so you could know which way to pronounce certain letters, but that is all a product of the Middle Ages. Now, the second thing that is less obvious, and the reason this is important is because if you look up, as we did on our last episode, we showed you the Phoenician and basically how that letter Rosh goes all the way back to the symbol of the head. Now, some people say that means in the beginning, right? Bereshit bara Elohim, or Elohim. But if you look at that, it's by wisdom, the gods, or the goddesses, I should say, created or formed. And that's really important. But the second part of that is the Rosh Hashanah. If you look at it, it's literally something that we've covered before that is really important to the miracle workers. And that's how it's spelled. Esne.
The Essenes. It's our old Alexandrian college friends, the Therapeutae. Cool.
And so when you look at that word, that is the Egyptian word for healer or miracle worker, which is the Egyptian counterpart to the Greek therapeuti, which, if you're familiar with Chance's work or mine, we've exposed this ad nauseum with the help of people like Reverend Robert Taylor, whose work we will be covering and going through.
You're bringing up res or rash, ras, words of this variation variety, meaning head and wisdom. The previous episode in the members only section, we talked about a lot of different cosmogonies, creation stories, and we're able to make a powerful link to the tradition of oracular heads, like the severed head of Mimir or John the Baptist, and the creation mythos of the Chaldeans, in which Belus, after slaying the Tiamat style mother of monsters, Omorka, cuts her in half, fashions the heaven and the earth out of the two halves of her body. He then cuts off his own head, and from the head and from the blood of his head, the other gods create mankind, which is said to be why human beings are endowed with divine reason or logos, is because we come from the head of the creator god Belus, who is like a Kronos figure. So we're going to be talking about Abraham and Sarai. Well, in esotericism, that word or that letter, the Hebrew R, Resh, is the letter associated with the sun card in the major arcana of the tarot. It also just so happens that the name Sarai or Sarah, Abraham's wife, is exactly the same spelling and numerical value as Resh. It's just different order. So Sarai would be Shin, Resh, Yod. And Resh would be Resh, Yod, Shin. But it's the same, it's just a jumble up of the letters, but it's basically the same word.
Yeah, Rish. Well, yeah, and you'll see that in other languages as well, pertaining to like admiralty and other lofty positions. But what I wanted to also say is the reason that's important is the Therapeutae or Essenes it's admitted by the father of ecclesiastical history. We've done this ad nauseum, but there are people who have never seen us before. They're going to come across this. Eusebius or Eusebius cited, somebody cited his work in Greek. One of the things that Robert Taylor cut his teeth on is translating the Greek of that father of ecclesiastical history. And he wrote, those ancient Therapeutae were Christians, and their writings are our gospels and epistles.
And
that is the admission from the father of ecclesiastical history. The only thing you know about Christianity, basically admitting that they're from Egypt and the College of Alexandria.
Yeah. And Taylor, among other authors like Faber, who I covered a lot in the previous episode, when you look at these guys' works combined, they will make, and Higgins too, will make a very convincing case that these Essenes were Buddhists, and that what we know of as Judaism was an offshoot of Buddhism that really flourished and developed in that Greco-Egyptian climate centered in the empire in Alexandria. And so whenever Eusebius says that the ancient Essenes were Christians and that their gospels were the Christian gospels, even though that's before Jesus was said to have been born, well, then you got to ask, okay, which stories are we talking about? And if it even be true, it might not be, but if it be true that the Old Testament stories are older than the New Testament stories, although I think there's a decent case to be made that they're just contemporary to each other, different versions of the same thing. Then when we look at some of the elements of Abraham and his son Isaac and how they one-to-one correspond to Christ and Krishna, then we've got to ask ourselves the question, like, did they mean that these Old Testament stories are the same as the New Testament stories, and that these are, you know, kind of like the way that J.J. Abrams made a new Star Wars movie, but beat for beat, it like was identical to the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope. I don't know if you ever saw that. It wasn't good, but it's a reboot where they use all the same themes, the same pacing, the same ideas, even the same characters in a lot of the same situations, but it's like a new story taking place in the future. And that's exactly what I see going on with the main narrative arc of the Old Testament, where actually this repetition happens multiple times within the Old Testament. And then in the New Testament, where the repetition is more just in the 4 different versions of the same story, and then the Revelation story. So that's, it's a monomyth, and you've got the symbolic keys to pick up on what that pattern is. It's like really quite obvious.
And for those who don't have those symbolic keys, I highly recommend going through the Spirit World series and then the Real Universal Empire, so you can see the position that I'm coming from, and then by and large, or by association, that Chance is coming from. Because this one, I tried to not make it advanced, but the chapter's pretty advanced. So it might be inaccessible for some of you, but it's okay. A lot of the people here have already gone through that work, and so we're catering to those who have supported us. That being said, Chance, do you have notes you want to kick off? Because mine almost goes right into it, and I think I might have to bogart a little bit of my intro notes unless you're really comfortable with the transliteration of like Hebrew and stuff to show people. But because I have that whiteboard, I can do it.
You just tell me if you want me to read something from yours. I'll kick off.
Yeah, do yours first.
Well, I don't have a lot to put before the members only section, but to quote Godfrey Higgins, he says, "The Persians also claim Ibrahim," that is Abraham, "for their founder, as well as the Jews. But Abraham was not merely the founder of the Persians, but various authors assert that he was a great magician at the head of the Magi, the standards of the tribes of the Israelites, the ornaments of the temple, the pillars of Joachim and Boaz, the latter with its orrery or sphere at the top of it, the Urim and Thummim. In short, the whole of the Jewish system betrays judicial astrology, or in other words, magic in every part." So we'll go on actually to demonstrate in my notes later on how Zoroaster and Abraham are the same guy. Interchangeable character. I don't know the most about the Zoroastrian scriptures, but we can at least make that point and pull on the thread later as it's available. And Dylan, we'll let you take it away into your free section. If you want me to read any parts, let me know. I've got it pulled up.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, for the transliteration stuff, just because I want this to be as succinct as possible, I'll carry through that, and then we'll go from there. So the material that Chance and I have been going through for this past several episodes is Robert Taylor's Astronomical Lectures. And this is written way after the Devil's Pulpit and after he got out of prison, as far as I can tell. He was thrown in prison for blasphemy. Now, he wrote on pages 188 and 189, "There is a very curious but most essentially important variation of the name of this most extraordinary personage with whom I am now to bring you acquainted. From the 11th chapter of this ancient Chaldean mythos called the Book of Genesis, in which he is first mentioned as Abram, the son of Terah, in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees, which demonstrates the Chaldean origin of his whole story, he is called Abram or Abram. But in the 17th chapter, God changes his name from Abram into Abraham. Now, assigning there's sunlight coming on my computer. I couldn't see that. So basically, he assigned the never to be forgotten reason for that change. Quote, neither shall thy name be thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. Now, this is important because I want to write this out. If you look at this, it's A-B-R-M. Now, you fill in the vowels, and there's no set rule. People will claim there's a set rule, but if you go back far enough, you have to decide that there's a set rule, and that's what I think happened in the Middle Ages.
There's no vowel points in the early synagogue Hebrew.
And this caters or is one of the things that fuels the suspicions that people like you and I have that this was only a written language and was never meant to be spoken when in its original form. Abraham is A-B-R-E-M. But if you look at this B in this Bayit is also a Vayit. So this could as easily be Avrim. This is a Hey. Hey functions like an E, and it corresponds to Ada in Greek, which looks like an H, which goes back to the H and the E being interchangeable. So they're deciding that that's pronounced like an H. But this very well could be Ivrim or Ibrim. And this goes back to the formation of the word Hebrew, the etymology being O-B-R-I.
Not to mention that Eve is the mother of all humanity, and this is the father of nations, Ivrim.
And Eve looks like EVE or Hey, Vav, Hey, which means life. And it's connected to this system and the way they create these names, which is important to understand the overarching thing that we're trying to teach here. So Taylor continued, this passage alone is fatal to the pretense of the people called Jews or of any other particular nation to be called the descendants or children of Abraham, since he was not to be the founder of a nation or any peculiar people, but a father of many nations, the common progenitor of all the families of the earth. A similar change of name, and for a similar reason, is announced with respect to Sarah, the wife of Abram, or Abraham, in the 15th verse of this chapter. He wrote, quote, and God said unto Abraham, as for Sarah, which literally is S-R-I, I'm going to write this out again so the audience can see it. I have to switch things so I can see my Shin, Resh, Yod. How would you get Sarah from that? You wouldn't.
You do get an interesting link that I'm just now noticing, that the Aleph Bet could also have ended up being pronounced Aub, which is a snake, and Shin Resh, Sir, that's also a snake. So there's the serpent thing going on in both names.
And you get a really important location of this system, the beginning of that, Sri Lanka. Now, that literally could be Siri, which would then be Ceres, right? Or the root of Sirius. Thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Siri, but Sarai or Sarah. So Sarai or Siri to Sarah. And then all they did was change the Yud into a Hey. That's it, S-R-E.
And that Shri, S-R-I, in Hinduism is like a honorific or a title, like Mr. or Mrs., but more applied to the deities, like that they are resplendent, radiant. So who knows? But it could have even been Shri Brahm, and then they just take that and make it two characters out of a title and a name.
Now, some people could write that as SRH, which would kind of give you the Sarah that we're familiar with, but it's specifically a hey and not a chet. And chet is usually what you see with the H, and that's what would correspond to the H. If you were to, now you can make the case, well, it doesn't always do that, and you don't understand the language, and I understand that it doesn't correspond to that in all the modern context. But what I'm showing people is the ancient system. And if you're going to admittedly take your letters from Phoenician, you're going to have to eventually tie it to that system. Yet the problem is you have no affinity to the Etruscan or the Phoenician, which do have affinity to each other, and Celtic. And you do have affinity to all the Egyptian Greek stuff, which is the mark of youth, not antiquity. So continuing.
Well, let's also point out that is, I think you mentioned it, but that Hebrew name that is given to us as Sarah would be a way in Hebrew of writing the name Ceres, which is Demeter, the harvest fertility goddess.
Which is the mother of heaven, or the queen of heaven, as you're about to see. So continuing with that passage from the Bible, I'll just read it, start from the beginning again. And God said unto Abram, as for Siri, thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Siri, but Sarah. Her name be, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Now, this is Robert Taylor, his own words. The name Sair, afterwards ill-pronounced and ill-written Shadi or Shira, was the same which the ancient Arabians originally gave to the star Sirius. Now, you want to pull up that image right under it, because this is important while I read this so people can see that he's not talking out of his ass here. And literally rendered signifies a star. If then we chose to suppose the highest respect to be due to this book of Genesis, it is an evident outrage against it and an egregious vanity and impudence, either to pretend or to admit the pretension of any particular nation or people upon the earth to be peculiarly or in any exclusive or distinguished sense the descendants of a race, the descendants or race of this universal Father and universal Mother of mankind. Now, do you want to read that next paragraph, and then I'll take over for the following one? Just give me a break.
Nor is there a single passage of either the Old or the New Testament that recognizes or countenances a national or political claim of any race or community of men that ever were upon the earth to be related to these entities, any more or any nearer than any other people. But contrariwise, the relation of to Abraham and Sarah is, in every instance in which it is alluded to, spoke of exclusively as a moral and not as a national, political, or hereditary relationship. There are no people on the earth. There never was a single individual of the human race, in any literal sense, descended from Abraham and Sarah, any more than there were ever any literal children of the devil or sons of Belial.
Were you able to, I haven't been looking at our StreamYard. Were you able to show that image of Al-Shira, the Arabic and stuff, so people could see that?
You know it.
Okay. Sorry. I'm not doubting. I just, I didn't see it. So I'm just double checking. Now, what's interesting about Al-Shira is it could literally be, if you look at the name, I'm just going to write the root of this to remind people why things like Huesh, the root of Jesus, is the God of fire. And we've covered this stuff, but this root, it's AS. Now you can transliterate it as ASH, or you can transliterate it as ESH. But if you were to just be honest about what it is in the ancient context, it's just AS or ES. It needs to go back to what Taylor calls the Ammonian radicals. Now, Ashira would have the second root, which we've covered extensively. And this would be the capital of Phoenicia, which is Sur. People write it as Tyre, but it's literally just Sadi Resh, which is TSR. So this is like a TS, and this is just a Resh R. So you have now that meaning, Sur, which is Lord, or it technically literally means rock, but it signifies Lord. So when you see this idea of their rock is not as our rock, no, it's their God, their Lord. Ashir is now the Lord of fire, or the hot God, or the God of fire. And you'll see that in the Hindu or the Indian system with Surya, which is essentially, if you look at that, Ashira, it's the same as what we covered in previous episodes, which is Asher, which looks like Asur in Hebrew. So when you see it written, Ashur in Hebrew looks like this. And they say this is the root of Assyrians. But it's
I want to also put in that you kind of blew past it, and a lot of the audience have gotten it, but Surya is the Hindu solar deity. So there's also an Etruscan underworld deity, Suri, but Surya is like Yah, God, and the word Resh just written back to front, which is the Hebrew letter given correspondence to the sun. So there's so many links, I mean, between Brahmanism and
don't get too far off
Genesis.
this. Don't get too far off of this, because I got to keep going with this, because it's all signified. Like, so what you'll see in the Norse is AS. This is alleged. This is what they claim in Elder Futhark. They say ASUR. Now, keep in mind, this can function as like a U or a V, but that's, again, the same word. And what is this? This is how what people now transliterate as Aesir. Aesir. But in the old way, it's alleged to be this, Asur, the same as Asher, the same as Assyrians. And I think this is where the historical narrative is kicking in, because now they're sitting here going, well, these are the Assyrians, not realizing that if you go back to the original language that this is from, which is Etruscan, you're going to see that it is Aesir. Isar, God. And the root of this also, Eser, Esar, is soul, the sun, the round plate. That's what soul means. It means a plate. Hence, plate O, the one, the perfect circle.
In Tolkien, you're aware of the character Aragorn, right?
Yes.
But in the actual books, and I think they may reference in the movies a little bit, the people call Aragorn in his kingly ascension Elisar.
There it is. And then
Tolkien knew this stuff.
What is God in the Celtic and the Irish? Aesar. Look it up in any Irish dictionary. Aesar. So this is why I came to the conclusion in July's End with Black Swans that the Assyrians, and this idea of late Sumer, corresponds to Asher, which is prosperity and all that stuff, which is the end of summer, which ties into this mother and father of us all that you can see in the virgin goddess, Virgo, right before the harvest season.
Who is Demeter, Ceres.
And together with the lion, she's always depicted with the lions, Leo, the sun going from Leo to Virgo. And then why then should I think upon a maid? You got to wait till the new year to harvest, which is right now after Judgment Day. And this is why the mythos is important. It's not just to tell stories. It's to signify times of the year where you do certain things for survival. And so if you want, I had to get that out of my system. If you want to continue with the Chazdim, actually it's the Chazdim. So the way you spell Chaldeans, it doesn't start with a chet like I would thought it would. It starts with a kaf. So it's like a C or a K. So to even transliterate that in English, like CHLD, like Chaldeans, that's wrong. It should always be with the K. So you pronounce it correctly, Kazdim. But if you want to continue from there with Abram, meaning most high, is the son of Terah.
Abram, meaning most high, is the son of Terah, which is earth, whose nativity is which is light. Regardless of interpretation, an honest man must concede this is astronomical. Taylor wrote, the Kasdim, translated the Chaldees, not being a national name, but a professional one, signifying the same as the magicians, the astrologers, the soothsayers, with which synonymous terms it is continually associated.
Do you want to keep going, or do you want me to do that paragraph?
Well, this is your part. Yeah, you get this part.
Okay.
So I'll read the Taylor sections, though.
Okay, cool.
Tell me when.
So the root of Abraham, like we just said, is Avri, which is Abre or Avre. And to me, that looks like Obri or Ivri, the root of Hebrew. Yeah, is pronounced Ivri by modern people. And we did this before. I kind of glossed over it. I'm going to write it out just for people who have never seen this before. Yod, He, Vav, He.
While you're writing that out too, Obri, the word we get as Hebrew, is said to signify one who has crossed over or an initiate.
Yes, they've passed through over the Hebraic degrees. It literally means man from beyond is like how they would literally, and some people say it's like a word to describe a foreigner. I don't know that I buy that. But what right here this is the EVE, Eve, life. Now you just add that, Yod, and it becomes Hova or Yova. And this is when you see Jove, which everybody admits is another name for Jupiter, which everyone concedes is an archaic name for the sun. Who knows what they're talking about? You see that Tetragrammaton is the sun. All you have to do is look up the coins and you'll see this depicted in the sun, this name, on tons of coins throughout our history. Now, this root right here is important because this, if you were to translate it literally, would be IE, the epithet for Apollo, which looks like IH in Greek, which is the root of Jesus. Oops, funny how that works. Oh, they don't have anything to do with each other. No, you're just illiterate. You're symbolically and linguistically illiterate, and you're historically illiterate. And this is the problem with our culture and why they keep falling for the same damn tricks over and over and over and over again. And it's going to keep going, and people are going to keep getting mad at this, and there are going to be people that see this and get it and pick it up. It's going to be the same endless nonsense conflict. I don't think this is ever going to get resolved. So the people here, you are consenting to be here, and this is what we're going to show you. We're not here to preach. This isn't the town square. I have zero interest in telling people, making people get this. But the reason this is important is because this is pronounced Yova. And this IE root in Latin is yo. And that's also been turned into a female deity in the mythos as well. But it corresponds to the original, which is you. You, Pater. God the Father, Italian. Our Father who art in heaven, the All-Father. And you can't do this in the other languages without going to Italy. And so the reason this is important to me is not to show people what this stuff means or expose your religious beliefs. It's to show the cultural diffusion that's being hidden, that people can't access because they haven't studied the systems or the languages. And that's why this is important to me. I don't care what people believe.
So I don't know where to fit this in because it's just something I found out that kind of tacks on to what we talked about last episode, but I can't believe I'd never come across this before, but there are writings where Hades is called Idanus. Both in Latin and in Greek ancient
So it's
authors.
like Ida, right? But it's like, first of all, it's the Phoenician Adonis for sure. But you've got the Ida from Mount Ida, and then you've got Nous.
Right, exactly. The mind.
And this is that. What is the Royal Arch? The Royal Arch. Boom. There's the two pillars. But you could do it this way too. Look at the Royal Arch, the Ras, right? In all the warriors' helmets. You know, the Trojans, the Romans, they all had that arch in their helmet.
And never forget that the Old Testament, as often as it's referring to Yova as Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh or Elohim, is also calling him Adonai, which just in English becomes Lord and God. And that's all they give. But Adonai, that's Hades. That's part of this diffusion too. So I didn't know where to fit that in, but people that watched the last episode and understand the significance of Nous and Ida, the mountain where Bacchus is raised or where the Ark lands, they're going to get it.
And just to show people the equivalent, the reason we're tying this into Ark and Argos and all that stuff is because the Greek correspondent, even in the Bible, to Ras, which they erroneously trace to in the beginning because of its meaning as head, is arche. That's why we just did that. Arche and Ras are the same word in different cultures.
Yeah, man. Let's get to the rest of your free section. We got a long way to go. We got so much gravy.
All right. So do you want to take over where Taylor also touched upon the grammatical situation? Because this is all good stuff for you.
Yep. Taylor also touched upon a grammatical situation regarding this particular language or system, referring to the Tetragrammaton, which makes it impossible to translate without taking liberties. It is something that all serious researchers must account for. He wrote, "There never was any idiom of speech in the world so common and universal as that by which in the Hebrew and all Oriental languages, anything which bore a resemblance to some other thing or stood in some close association or comparison with it was called the son of that thing or its daughter."
You'll see this is important because in all like the mythos, it's always like Heracles or whatever, son of man, who is the son of God. You know, there's always these like weird associations.
Or yeah, like being the son of night or the son of air, the daughter of, a force of nature or an element. So they're saying that's a way of saying it is that element. It's not, esoterically, it is that element.
Yeah. And we do this in our own language. Just look at English. I put in a couple of idioms like necessity is the mother of invention, right? Necessity motivates innovation. One of my favorites in Italian is La mamma degli idioti è sempre incinta. The mother of idiots is always pregnant, right? And it's like saying there's a never ending amount of idiots in this world. Every generation is going to bear new ones, but there's no literal mother, right? And this is the monumental key for those of you looking for authentic ways to interpret mythological stories or confirm others' interpretations. You need to take into account, are they able to do this? Do they have the skill set to recognize the idioms? And I would say that most of them don't, because the people translating these languages are not connected to the original cultures. And that's the challenge that we have. And then it's kind of crazy because then everybody fights over it. And it's like, but that's not your culture anyway.
Taylor continued, "These languages had no adjectives and were therefore driven on a necessity of expressing the qualities of nouns by the use of other nouns, supposed to bear a relation to them. And hence, they could not designate a righteous man, but as the son of something or somebody that had been supposed to possess a character similar to that which they would ascribe to him. The generation of the faithful and the children of the wicked one were the necessary paraphrases to express the characters of persons who were themselves faithful or wicked, but not at all implying the real existence of the faithful and the wicked, whose generation or children they were said to be. Thus the Son of God takes on a new meaning." Taylor continues, "Thus we read continually such figures as the sons of Eli, were sons of Belial. That is, they were bad men, not literally sons of Belial. Nor had any such person as Belial really existed. They were only like to what was adverse or opposed. So when Saul would call his son perverse and rebellious, he could find no other phrase for that sense than thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman, nothing being further from the meaning than any idea of his really being the son of any such woman, or any woman of such a character having a real existence. Nor is a real existence implied in the abstractions which are hieroglyphed under the names of Abraham and Sarah, nor any real physical descent or continuation implied in that Orientalism of speech, whereby good and virtuous persons are called the children or sons and daughters of Abraham and Sarah. The relationship is always moral, never national or personal. It was those only who resembled the character attributed to Abraham or who studied or understood the astronomical science, veiled under the names and allegorical histories of Abraham, as in that noble challenge of the evangelical prophet, hearken to me that follow after righteousness, ye that seek the Lord, look unto the rock whence ye are hewn, and to the hole of the pit whence ye are digged. Look unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah that bare you. As St. Paul in his epistle to the Romans, who certainly were not Jews nor of Jewish extraction, emphatically calls Abraham the father of us all, grounding his argument on the text, as it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations. Romans 4:17. And in his epistle to the Greeks of Galatia, he expressly designates Sarah, the wife of Abraham, the mother of us all.
And something I thought was interesting for the show notes, or if you want to click that image, it's up to you. The fact that many in the Greek is written Pollon. Pollon would be like basically Pollon. And if you just put the A, that's that's Apollon, the angel of the abyss. So if Pollon means many in that context, the name Apollon could signify without, because when you put the A in front of something in the Greek, it means without or the absence of.
Or it's Ab, father.
Yeah, well, you could look at it.
Apollon.
Well,
many.
Yeah, that's exactly that's what I take out of it, because that AP and AB. But I just thought that was interesting. Either way you break this, it's going to lead to the one, or Sol Invictus, or the invincible son, or the alone one, Solus. And we already talked about that fiery round plate being Sol. That's what it means. It's a round plate in Latin. Again, it's a poetical way of describing the sun. You want to continue? Taylor continued, or do you want me to take over?
Taylor continued. Our inquiry is, who was Abraham? And it is of singular importance to observe that he is designated the son of Terah, which is the word for earth, and of Ur of the Chaldees. His story then is not Jewish, not Hebrew, not of Palestine, of Judea, or of Egypt, but of Chaldea, and not possibly, therefore, of the composition of any such person as the supposed Moses must be supposed to be, not possibly original in any Hebrew exhibition of it, but necessarily derived to the Hebrew, Syriac, Phoenician, or Greek versions from its native Chaldea. To Chaldea, then, and Chaldaic records, we must necessarily turn for the solution of our inquiries as to the first type of this Chaldaic person, or personification of Abram, the son of Terah, of Ur, of the Chaldees.
And one of the things that's challenging with the Chaldeans, from what we have, it looks like that portion of India used to expand all the way to what is now the border of Pakistan and is it Iran? Persia?
Yep, it's definitely getting into Persia.
So the old days, that would have been India. But then there was the religious wars and the Persians came over and claimed that land. So the Chaldeans ended up in the Persian territories. And that's why people associate them with Persian. And people who call themselves Chaldean associate themselves with Persian. But it's very similar to the Cohens, which means priests. the Kasdim, they're the priests, astronomers. And so it's not a race originally. It was a priest class. Now, are there descendants or are people just decided to take that word and claim it as their own as a family? Sure. But in the original sense, which is what we try to go back to here to understand the big picture, they were not a race. And the problem with the history of them is conceded by Taylor, who acknowledged that we need to rely on fragments of Greek writers, such as Abydinus or Abydinus. I don't know how to say that because I can't see the Greek. Apollodorus, Alexander, Polyhistor, and Berosus, who is a priest of Belus. And everybody knows Baal is the sun. And they exist, Berosus existed in a location we call Babylon, which was the alleged capital of the Chaldean Empire. But if you look at what the Bible says, Rome is called Babylon. So this might mean in that context, that because it's an Etrusco-Phoenician word, that the capital was in Rome. The system originated in Rome, possibly. And I don't think
I think it could be just the same as Biblios and a different termination. Biblion, yeah. Biblios being the Phoenician capital, the city of the book, the Bible, And
it wouldn't take that much to like transpose that into Babylon or Biblios.
Not at all.
And Babylon is literally Vivlion. Bible is literally the book is Vivlion. So, and Babylon could very well be Vavilon. So who the hell knows? But this is all anecdotal, what we're talking about. But what's not anecdotal is the following time frame corresponding.
Here's another anecdotal one, man.
Do it up.
Do the beta to V swap. And this word we're saying, Biblion, could be Viv El On, the life of God Son. Like I know that's maybe a stretch, but it's in that word.
It's there. And so where this goes from the anecdotal to the factual is when you can find a couple different points supporting one way or the other. But what's not anecdotal is being able to take it apart linguistically and see these roots there. Now, Taylor wrote as Abydinus and Berosus speak of regularly reigning sovereigns through a period of 10 Sarai, which is
Sarai?
Sarah, which is the plural of Saros, which is that cycle that we've talked about a long time ago, which is
a solar cycle, Saros cycle.
Yep. Which is literally the name of Sarah, S-R-E, without the A, that's Sarai or Sadi, which is 36,000 years, and Apollodorus of dynasties continued through 4 times that period, which is 144,000 years, it never being forgotten that whatever we may think of such dates resting on such authorities compared to our Mosaic accounts, which reckon the world but as 6,000 years old, the ancient Chaldee astronomers are proven to have been acquainted with the very highest discoveries of astronomical science, and to have calculated the measure of time to the precision of the setting of a chronometer, while the whole world besides were as ignorant as religious people in all the world have ever been. Now, that 144 degrees is the entirety of the zodiac. So this is an ancient system that people don't really account for anymore. But what you would have at any given time is 144 degrees. At any given time above the horizon, you're going to have 72 degrees. So there's going to be 72 degrees following the sun or Jesus, and 72 conspirators killing the sun or Osiris, the god of the underworld. So it's all related to the sun's journey through the year. And if you want to look that up, that's called dodecatemoria. And each sign is broken up into these like 12 degrees. But then you see the 36,000 years. This all goes back to the circle, 360 degrees in a circle, because that is the perfect symbol, and it's idealized as being a symbol of God, which must also be perfect. And that is the root of almost all of the modern occultism that you see being infused in science. It's trying to make this system apply to the natural world, but it doesn't apply to the natural world because the natural world isn't perfect the way they want it to be. It's just always off by just a little bit, so you can never get comfortable.
You want to read the rest of this from Taylor here? Okay, so I'm just going to start back from the beginning of this quote. As Abininus and Berosus speak of regularly reigning sovereigns through a period of 10 Sari, which is 36,000 years, and Apollodorus of dynasties continued through 4 times that period, which is 144,000 years. It never being forgotten that whatever we may think of such dates resting on such authorities, compared to our Mosaic accounts, which reckon the world as but 6,000 years old, the ancient Chaldee astronomers are proved to have been acquainted with the very highest discoveries of astronomical science, and to have calculated the measure of time to the precision of the setting of a chronometer, while the whole world besides were as ignorant as religious people in all the world have ever been. The prophet Isaiah speaks of Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldean excellence. Nor was it till after the return of the Jewish people from their Babylonish captivity that the name of Abraham, or any portion of the Chaldaic story, was found in books that claimed a Jewish origin. The demonstration, then, is complete. It is a plagiarism. And John McHugh just does a really great job of showing, too, how the Old Testament miracle stories are plagiarized from the same system of astrotheology as what appears in the cuneiform Babylon tablets, which there's, forgery or not, I mean, there's thousands of those bad boys. So if it's a forgery, somebody did a lot of work, because there's a shitload of them, but it's still very confusing, hard to track down system. We'll leave that for now. Taylor continues. They stole it from their masters, the Chaldeans, and without caring to acquaint themselves with the astronomical significancy, they adopted the veil of an occult science as a tissue of real history and pretended that history was peculiarly their own. So I'll make a point. I actually think they knew the astronomical significancy, and they used that system to create a history, a backwards judicial astrology, and that's where they're getting their history. So I don't think that he has it exactly right there. I think they knew exactly what they're doing, but that the astronomer priests were able to invent histories that they could pass off as real or assert were real because they come from the star scripture.
Yeah, and the idea that this system is being carried around the world by shepherds to where you see it is total horseshit. It required advanced knowledge of navigation, astronomy, the ability to even build ships, the ability to even build temples. This is nothing that you see that's consistent with a race of shepherds. Right? And something I wanted to point out about that bill or bail, this root, Bayit, Ayin, Lamed, looks like BOL, but you could see how it could be transliterated into BYL very easily from the Hebrew.
So we got just one little bit here. Go ahead, go off on Isaiah, because this is where we're quoted.
So Isaiah is literally Jesus, God. And it goes back to what I was just telling you with the Yod He Vav He. And so people can see how that circles back. And again, if I don't explain it, it's going to get lost in the sauce, because this stuff is really hard to follow along with if you don't know. Just like if somebody speaks a foreign language to you and you don't know it, you're not going to be able to follow along, even though you hear it. That Yod He, which is transliterated as Yah, or sometimes it just sometimes just YA, whatever. Yah, that means God. Well, if you put the name of Christ, which is Isa in Arabic, Isa, I say Yah. Christ, God. And this word in Hebrew, whether it's Yod, Shin, Ayin, sorry, my thing's running out, or whether it's Yod, Shin, Hey, that would be ISO or ISE, respectively. Yasha, basically the root of Jesus, all you do is add a Vav in there. Yeshua, it means savior and deliverance, redemption.
And even in the mainstream, they say that name means Yah is salvation. It's Savior Yah, which is what Jesus is. The name points to.
Yeah. So the reason that's important is for all of this reckoning with the Babylon, Father, Lord, Son, his glory of the kingdoms being the light of the sun in each of the signs of the zodiac as he passes through them. The Jews, or gods, right? It's the people of God, in bondage would be the stars blotted out by the light of the sun, only free at night. Out of Egypt, once they've come over the horizon, there's no sun or Pharaoh enslaving them. I'm of the opinion that the Chaldeans were a priest class, not a race, in a portion of the world that used to be India prior to the Persian takeover. Doesn't mean I'm right, but I don't accept that the idea that people in that part of the world enslaved Mesopotamians or Eastern Europeans, but it's a position that I will be willing to change in light of better evidence. But if you're going to provide evidence, it can't be entangled with this astro-theological nonsense. And something I was coming across yesterday that will be of interest. When you look at the word fire in Greek versus the word for wheat, it's the same fucking word without the termination. Pyr, and that's what you see in pyramid, Pyr, Pur, right? This looks like, when you capitalize that, it looks like this in Greek. And pyros, wheat. So wheat and fire will also correspond to this wrath of God, the hottest point of the year, the sun, that the wheat is growing in and then harvest in autumn.
And you can make beer with wheat, which P and B, swapping, you have birish, which is the word for beer. Although the Greeks, I don't think were making beer back then. They were more wine folks.
No, but the commonalities, the Egyptians and the Irish, the ancient Britons were the only two people that were making drink from barley.
So with Isaiah too, one thing I'll tack on is the gematria value in Hebrew for that name is 401. And according to like occult gematria, there's at least in Hebrew, there's a thing called the rule of Kolel, which is a value of one different from something else is esoterically the same thing. So 401 is esoterically 400. And 400 is the value of the Tav, the cross. So it's the cross, the Tav, which is the omega of the Hebrew alphabet, the last letter, plus an Aleph, the alpha. So even numerically, the name Isaiah, in my opinion, encodes Aleph, Tav, alpha and omega for the Hebrew version of that phrase. So maybe anecdotal, but I mean, that's there. It's mystically there. That's right. So we'll see you on the other side of this. And for everybody who wants to see that, subscribe to Chance's, for his people, to patreon.com/Interverse. And for me, it's greattide.substack.com. We'll see you. Yeah. And I want to thank all the new members. I got a whole bunch of new members, even though I raised the price up to $8 a month from $5, which is long overdue. The content is obviously worth more than that. So the fact that people saw the value in it and went to support it after I announced that price change, I appreciate. Want to point out, we might be at it for a while with this episode. Last week, we gave you about an hour of preview, and that might have felt like a full meal, but the whole show was like 4 hours. Don't know how long we'll go today, but we are definitely just in the preview. I mean, we're scratching the surface. We're going to have to really ladle it to get through all of this stuff. It's going to be great. All the best stuff's on the other side. Thanks for being here for the preview, and thanks to the supporters. We'll see you all them on the other side.